Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to have AJ Davis with us today. AJ is a leading expert in user experience and conversion rate optimization, or CRO. AJ has worked with major brands like CVS, Steve Madden, and Lululemon, helping them maximize their revenues through successful CRO strategies. Before founding her own CRO and digital marketing agency called Experiment Zone, AJ was the lead UX researcher on the Google Optimized product, playing a key role from its initial concept all the way to launch. AJ, it's great to have you today. Welcome to the IJK podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on. Great to be here.
AJ, before we dive in our topic for today, could you define what conversion rate optimization and A/B testing are and why they are important for online businesses?
Yeah, so every business is trying to get two things. They're trying to get people to be aware of what they do, and they're trying to get them to buy what they sell. And we help with that second piece. So we consider ourselves post-click. So people run ads, they do SEO or search engine optimization. They do all these things in their marketing efforts to get people to know about what they do. And then we handle the second piece. We help make sure that the folks that take a look at your site or get to know your business, know what it is you sell, know how they can purchase it or how they can fill out a lead form. So we get into the nitty-gritty details. We do things like test one design of a page versus another and track all the data to point out which thing worked better. So to your question about what is an A/B test, an A/B test in the way that we think about it is if we were to say maybe we have a carousel, like an image carousel on a page, and maybe we're testing, should it be a lifestyle image first or should it be a product image first? So we test different things that we have hypotheses around. We test it at the same time to 50% of the traffic sees one, 50% sees the other. That way we can measure the differences and control for other, situational things outside of that.
Okay, so you care about what the user does beyond the visit, after the visit.
We want them to become a customer. So typically we want to do that in the shortest path possible. And sometimes that means getting them to sign up for an email today so that your team can nurture them via the email list or a text message list for months and months. Or some sales are more immediate, like in e-commerce. Somebody might be willing to buy a pair of shoes without having that long nurture campaign.
Right. And AJ, a personal question.
Mhm.
What inspired you to pursue a career in user experience and CRO? Why did you choose this field
Why
specifically?
did I run into this? That's a great question. I always kind of saw my career path as a little bit winding, and now that I am doing what I've been doing for a while, I see that it was actually a straight shot. So I was an economics major. I was always interested in psychology in economics, so
Mhm.
how people make decisions about their financial well-being and optimizing their lives through, you know, various ways of spending their time or their money or solving their problems. I went into finance and that ended up not being a great fit for me. And I had 100 coffees with people, which led me to this wonderful woman who was doing UX research or user experience research at another financial institution. And from there, I went to grad school and went to Google and have been doing UX ever since.
And the rest is history.
The rest is
Okay.
history. Yeah, I
All
mean, at
right.
the end of the day, like, what else is there besides the relationships we have with people and what makes people tick?
You're right. Uh, let's talk a bit about methodology here. So A/B testing can sometimes seem complicated or overwhelming. You mentioned now very briefly, like you would test different images or assets. So if we were to explain this to non-marketers, how would you explain it in very simple terms?
Yeah, the simplest example that pretty much any of these testing tools would have you talk about is a red button versus a blue button. And most of the time, it doesn't really matter very much what color the button is that you choose, as long as people can see it and it's easy to find. But basically, we could have the same page design. You might go to walmart.com and they may have like a message at the top and it'd be the same for 50% and the other 50%, but maybe the button is the only thing that's different. And so then they can measure what's the difference in whether people click on that button or not and ultimately buy something or not.
Okay, I see. And when it comes to running those tests, do you run them by certain group of or cohort of users? Is there like a sample size that you look at, or a certain duration for a test to be statistically kind of significant?
Yes. Yes to all of the above. So we always
Okay.
run for at least 2 weeks because somebody shopping on a Saturday might be different than someone sneaking in some shopping at work on a Wednesday.
Mm.
Needs for someone in a different industry might vary by day as well. So we want to always make sure we're testing within a full week cycle.
Uh-huh.
And then the other things we're looking for is we want to make sure we have a representative sample. So how many people normally are seeing this page and what amount of kind of change are we anticipating, and
Hmm.
that helps us lead to what we expect the duration to be. And so we determine all that up front so that we reduce the chance of being biased during the test being live because we happen to see some data that looks good. We
Hmm.
always make sure we run it for that full duration. So yes, we want to make sure we've got enough people. To your
Okay.
question about the segment and the audience, it's actually a really interesting question in our field. So some people will run really, really narrow tests. They'll
Hmm.
say, here's this landing page for folks coming from Facebook. Should they see this message or this message? I prefer to take the approach of let's send that message to everyone and
Yep.
collect all the data and then back into did we actually observe differences between different Facebook groups or people coming from Facebook versus someone coming through search. Because what might actually be is that everyone on a mobile device needs a certain message or a certain layout and someone on desktop responds differently rather than the hypothesis of it just being important to Facebook visitors. So
I see.
more data is better. It gives us a lot more clarity to move forward as a business.
Absolutely. And when you run those A/B tests, do you typically change one element? Like, is it only the button every time, or like one thing, or you may do like a drastic change and then you would A/B test on the drastic change?
You can do both, but we generally recommend to our clients to pick one theme per test. So if the problem that we're trying to solve, I always talk about problems because we have lots and lots of ideas of things that could be better, that could be helpful for conversion, but it should be anchored to a problem that people are having today that's keeping them from converting. So if we think about a specific problem, like people are having trouble finding details about the product, they're wanting to know what the stitching looks like. That might lead us to a couple changes to the product image carousel all in one test. Now, the more traffic you have, the smaller or more granular the change can be, and the quicker you'll get a response. So, Amazon will test 100 ways of changing the image carousel, and we might be comfortable with some of our clients to change like 2 or 3 things within one test.
I see. I understand. Okay. And what about when you get inconclusive results, or let's say a result that contradicts previous findings? What do you do in these cases?
I actually love inconclusive results because it sparks this curiosity in me because either I think I'm right or I think I'm wrong, but if there's something a little more muddled in it, there's some more interesting data to go find. So before I got into conversion rate optimization, I was a qualitative user experience researcher or UX researcher. So my bread and butter is figuring out some of those harder qualitative answers to like what are the problems, what are people struggling with. So whenever we have an inconclusive test, we'll run user studies. We'll interview people, we'll observe how they're using the interface, and we'll have them think aloud so we can start to understand what might be getting them stuck. And so the more data we can kind of triangulate together, the more clear we can be on what might be needed, or maybe we had the wrong problem in the first place, and now there's a whole different direction we should pursue for the solution we test.
I see. So you would go to other types of let's say focus groups or interviews or like different means to understand like if your result makes sense or don't make sense. So you balance your decision at the end by using the quantitative output and the qualitative output. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, it's almost like you sandwich it with the qualitative. So if you have
Okay.
a quantitative result that's confusing,
Yeah.
you could run more quantitative experiments. You could run more A/B tests, which we have done and we will do in certain
Hmm.
circumstances. But if we're really stuck, if it's inconclusive, we're just not really sure why something's not working, bringing in that qualitative data can give us clarity on the problem and then lead us to another solution to test. So it's almost like we sandwich between the two tests some additional data that fuel and improve what we end up putting out there for the final test.
All right. All right. Okay. Cool. Now, let's imagine we have a web page. Okay, we have so many different elements. How do you prioritize which element to test when you can choose like let's say the title or the button or the call to action? How do you like work with the priorities of all these different elements?
Yeah, it really comes down to our GPS model, which we use, which is goals, problems, and solutions. So just like I said, there's hundreds and hundreds of ideas you might have for what the copy should be, what the button should look like, what the image should be. But at the end of the day, we want to know what is it that the business is trying to do? What are the goals of the visitor, right? So it might be the visitor might have different goals depending on the page they're on or the context they're in. And then what are the problems preventing them from achieving those goals together? And those problems will point us to a more narrow set of solutions that then we can evaluate. So then within that pool of more narrowed solutions, we'll evaluate things based on, is it highly visible? Is it above the fold? Can people see it without scrolling? Is it something that's a bigger pain point on mobile than desktop if desktop is making up less of their customers or has a higher conversion rate? We'll ask things like, what's the level of effort to implement or to test this idea? So there's lots and lots of ways we can prioritize specific solutions, but one of the things we always come back to is what is the problem that we're trying to tackle in order to know that this solution even makes sense to think about.
I see. I see. Can you share an example of a small change that led to a big improvement in conversion so that we can a little bit relate to what we're talking about?
Yeah. It's funny, I have been telling this one story for quite a while, and we retested it in a completely different context. So I'm going to tell you the new version of this story, but it's the same answer. So we ran a global test, which means every page of the website would have the same change. And if you think about a website, most of the time at the top, and sometimes on the left side, but usually at the top, there's something that's called the navigation. So the navigation will have a button to go see the home page or the product page, maybe go to your shopping cart. Above that, sometimes is something we call a pencil banner. So it's about it's like the size of my finger. It's really small, little thin banner across the top. And a lot of times businesses have this and they can just quickly change out the message that's there. So a lot of marketing teams will use it to advertise a new product or they'll make an announcement to customers. And it turns out what's there really matters to your conversion rate. And so we try to encourage our customers to be very strategic and not make that just this sort of flexible message that can change kind of at whim based on what the marketing goals are that month, but instead have it be a very intentional piece of the design of the product. So when we come to the website and we look at it, the test that we ran recently, again, was to take that banner and to encourage people to sign up for an email list, which makes sense. So if you're new to a website, you don't really know much about the business or brand, it seems like they're selling something that might be interesting to you. An email list or like an SMS list is a great way to learn more, kind of stay informed, maybe get a discount. So with this client, we changed that banner message. Actually, they didn't have one. So we put a banner message that said, subscribe to our email list. It didn't have an incentive. It just said, do it and you'll get some news. And we had twice as many people sign up for emails as before, which is good, right? That was the goal. But more interestingly, more people ended up becoming customers.
Okay.
So we improved order conversion as well as email conversion.
All right.
And so
From just that small change.
Just adding a pencil banner.
A pencil banner.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what I love about it is we don't always connect the dots when we're designing something. Like I don't always expect it or anticipate the right thing, but I have experience doing it. So many people don't always think through or know how it might connect the dots of how important the nudge about what your email, the value your email newsletter will be to someone, for them also learning what it is you do. Not even getting an email, just today. What is it that they offer? What is the kind of news you're going to give me? Oh, you seem like a company that can help me. And it leads them to do more research and ultimately become a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, many webmasters or website owners rely on intuition, right? When, filling those fields or deciding what to have in that particular area of the website. How does intuition play any role in the world of CRO, or it's discouraged to rely on intuition? It's more the data that speaks.
I love that question. I do think it's an art and a science. So I think that the art of this or the intuition of it is which solution you decide should be done, right? So the problem might be super clear and there might be 5 solutions that could work, but those 5 solutions really only exist because of previous experience, which is what I think intuition is. I think intuition is just previous experience. And so if we think about the choices we make for the solution, there's not hard data on what should we test, but there's good intuition on what we should test to solve the problem. And then there's hard data to validate it and update our intuition so we're even better the next time.
All right. So now that you mentioned this surprising effect from just changing the pencil banner, I was wondering, let's suppose that we have an e-commerce site. are there specific elements that, based on your experience, are recurrent, like they always come back? When you optimize those, you feel like there's a lift in order rate and revenue? Like, are there like common elements that work for certain industries that are different probably for different industries? Like, let's say an online newspaper needs testing for different elements, whereas an e-commerce site, maybe, I don't know, the button is one, I don't know. But could you talk about these differences, and what would they be in the case of e-commerce specifically?
I would say it's tough because in some ways, like the example I gave you surprised us. So it's not something that I would tell people listening to go do. I would tell them if they test, like they should certainly test it because it could be the wrong choice for them. There are a subset of things that we might recommend just doing because we've seen it consistently work, or the problem is so clear that it doesn't quite matter what the solution is. We need to solve it fast and just iterate from there. So I would say things like being able to communicate about your brand. A lot of marketers work really hard to figure out how to say what they do, who it's for, and why you should work with a company or what the
Okay.
differentiators are.
So
And
the why, basically.
the why, the
Yeah.
what and the why and the who.
The what and the why. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could tell you that probably 80% of the sites that if I were to randomly roll the dice on a website, 80% of those would not sufficiently cover those 3 points before I have to scroll and find information.
Okay.
And so that's low-hanging. Like, it's a low-hanging opportunity for every business to just make sure they get that right and get it above the fold and don't make their visitors work for it. I would say directing attention is another theme that even without testing, you can start to make some edits that you'll see some benefits from. So at every single moment in a customer journey, so like the pages that you're going to experience across the website, you need to have a single focal point or CTA for
Okay.
every visitor to really focus on. So if you have a call to action, a CTA, that is above the fold and it tells you this is the next step we want you to do. Okay, now here's the next step you've added to cart. Here's the next step you're going to check out. It's like you're holding hands with them and guiding them through the experience. It doesn't mean they're going to do it right now, but it means that they'll know what the expectation is or the purpose is of that page. So that'd be the second one. I would say make sure to always set super clear expectations on every page of like what you want people to do from here, and don't make them choose from 100 things.
Okay. So limit the focus to one or two things that are important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And when it comes to, for example, things like I don't know, long forms to fill, or some sites require you to create an account before then you are able to process any purchase. Like, are these things also tested in the world of A/B testing and CRO?
They should be.
Should be.
Not always, yeah.
Not always. Okay.
Yeah, but companies who are doing CRO should be doing, everybody should be doing CRO. And if you have forms, you should be testing them because it does matter. I would say forms are one of the surprising things. I have a book in my collection over here that's like how to do form design. And for years, that's just what I thought was the right answer until I discovered CRO and started testing forms. And almost all of it was out the window. There are some good things, like you should label all the fields, but the
Is
order
shorter
of...
always better? Like, is
No,
short?
it's not.
Ah, okay. Because this
Yeah.
is my intuition, right?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
one of the things where the other one that the intuition is off and off for folks, was off for me, was like when you go to a website and the first thing you see is that sign up for our email list, get 10% off. People think that's annoying to people. We actually see higher conversion rates when that's there, whether or not they use the discount code or not, almost every time.
So this is why certain things are counterintuitive, and then we just need to go through A/B testing to really get the answer.
My intuition is getting closer to being on point for those specific things because we've tested them, but I'm still wrong a lot of the time, and that's why my job is so fun.
Okay, that's really cool. Okay, now, do you think like CRO and A/B testing, do you think it will change in the next few years with the advent of AI now and machine learning? Like, I know that this field existed, like, I don't know, over the past 20 years, and there was not much AI going on. But now that we have machine learning and AI and big data, do you think this will like drastically change in the coming years?
I think it's going to change everything. I think it's changing how we're all doing business, but I think it'll make some things easier. So like for my team, it'll make things easier to collect data, to have more data, maybe to move more rapidly. But the things that won't change if assuming humans are still using the website and still making purchases, we're still optimizing for their behavior, and we still need a certain number of visitors to do it. Now, where it gets complicated is when a machine is talking to a machine. So when you have a website interacting with like an AI agent, are the conversion needs different? And so I think that's going to be something we're going to start having to really tackle as businesses is how do I design the messaging around my business to interact with an AI who's taking action on behalf of a human?
I see. So currently it's all you probably sit with your team and you decide to test this or that. But do you foresee like a scenario in the future whereby this is all done on autopilot? Like there's something on the site that automatically understands where are the gaps and then that launches new web pages. Is this kind of too much woo-woo, or this might happen in the future?
I mean, I think AI is opening doors way faster than anyone expected, right? And so I think there's kind of two takes right now on AI. Either it's slowing down or it is accomplishing what it says it's going to do. So I'm more in the camp of like there are some incredible feats being done by AI. There's some like groundbreaking work that has come out in the last few weeks from being able to do math at a level of like a graduate level student. So we are seeing this sort of rapid progression of the computer to be very, very capable. I don't think it would be smart for me to say that it won't take my job. I think at some point the computer will take everyone's job. I think that the tests I've done with AI so far. So if you were to say, do I need to hire AJ or can I just ask ChatGPT what my website needs right now or what I should test? It'll give you a pretty good list of test ideas, but it's missing right now that reasoning that connects the dots between goals, problems, and solutions. So it will give you 100 ideas that are solutions, and it will kind of tell you why those solutions could work. But what AI cannot do right now, at least not when I've seen, is it can't tell you the problems that your users have or your visitors have and why that's keeping them from converting. So it'll give you good ideas. Maybe it's going to take over that piece of how I spend my time about thinking about what the solution is or how to build the solution. But at the current state of things, AI is having trouble figuring out what the problems are in people that stand between them being a visitor and becoming a customer.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So currently the AI might provide like general solutions, but it won't provide a customized solve for the problem, right? Because first it doesn't have access to the data, to your site's data. I think if I were to ask ChatGPT now, how can I improve my homepage conversion? They might give me like best practices, right? They might just like mention some best practices, but that human aspect that is also very important. You mentioned before like a qualitative component that is sometimes used as well in conjunction to the quantitative analysis. So this thing is as well missed, right, with the AI, I guess. But if we think a little bit about, for example, those intelligent chatbots now that are AI powered, that exist on almost any site. Like I remember, like 2 or 3 years back, they were just like normal chatbots. Now they are powered by a like Gen AI or something similar. Do these play, or will these play an increasingly important role in conversions as well, and conversion rate optimization, and basically increasing the number of visitors that convert to customers?
I think it's quite possible. I mean, I think there's a world, I think there's a lot of ways this could impact the way we interact and do business. So you could imagine a world where AI is so good that my company's AI talks to you, my customer.
Yeah.
And it's actually not talking to you, but actually your AI, who you've asked it to go do your shopping for you. And the two of them like interface in some
Wow.
way. So maybe the website's just a big chat box where they like are interacting. Obviously, that's pretty far-fetched. We're not there right now. But I do
Yes.
think that we could imagine more of the shopping experience being within that chat experience. Maybe it feels more like a salesperson. Maybe they're more persuasive than the copy on your site. But I do think that some people aren't likely to fully engage in that right off the bat, and more it's going to be one of the several channels that people can interact with you, at least in the
I
short
see.
term, before they have their own AI doing their shopping.
Yes. I see. I can imagine. I'd like to talk a bit about some key metrics that you look at, whenever you run your conversion rate optimization process. I know, conversion rate is obviously one, but what are other important key metrics that you usually look at and monitor to make sure or to confirm that you've actually improved on the results?
Yeah, here's where we do it a little bit different than what other CRO teams might do. So if you were to just set up a test yourself, it will ask you what is the test metric, and then it'll optimize for that. So if the goal is to get more ads to cart, it'll optimize just for that. But we like to have a set of metrics. So we do a test metric, which is the primary metric we're trying to see an improvement in or a decrease in. And that will be dependent on what change we've made. And then we have decision metrics, which are things that are on the way to revenue for the company or represent things that are revenue to the company. And then we have analysis metrics, things that will help us understand why this worked or why it didn't. So, for example, that email test I told you about with the pencil banner, if you were to set that up yourself and pick one test metric, you would have seen this worked really well for getting new email signups. And a lot of the tools will track that for you. It'll say, here's how many signups you got. But what you wouldn't know is that you also got more orders. Because for us, we want to make sure we track all the revenue related things, like an email has a value to the business. The order itself has direct revenue right now. A cancellation of a subscription is different. So we track all the kind of revenue specific things. And then we also track all the behaviors around it. So we would, in that same test, have tracked how many people clicked on the button on the banner or any part of the banner to take them to the page to sign up. How many people entered their name in the first step, the email in the second field, and then clicked the button to subscribe. And what that additional data gets us is that maybe the banner itself was very, very effective. Maybe 200% more people saw the page to sign up for email, but their intent was so low and we asked them too many questions that the drop-off would be then shown step to step, pointing us to a new problem, which is maybe our fields are too complex or not conveying the value of the newsletter. So that's the value that we get from those additional metrics is it helps us kind of point to new problems that we need to go solve.
All right. Do you also look at certain benchmarks? Like a question I always had, I know that sometimes they say on e-commerce, like a good conversion rate is 1% or 2%, let's say. Do you rely on these benchmarks or they're no longer like reliable? Like let's say the financial, the online retailing has that conversion rate or this conversion rate. Do you use these things as well? Or you compare each client to itself?
I think the most important thing is within the A/B test that one thing did better than the other. So it could be that there was a sale running and they were at a 10% conversion rate that week, but one converted at 8% and one converted at 12%, and that points us to the better outcome. But we do want to know, how are we doing overall? What's the trend of the business? What are some of the other factors or channels that are converting at different rates? So benchmarks are really helpful, as well as historical data, for just understanding, are there shifts happening in who's coming to our site, what their intent is, and making sure that we're addressing other potential problems. So within a test, we don't consider benchmarks, but in terms of just understanding, are we on track for our goals and are there some new problems to tackle, we need to consider benchmarks.
I see, I see. And when you come up with, let's say, suggested changes based on your test, uh, you know, brands have sometimes brand guidelines, and the boss might say, I want to retain my brand integrity and all that, and user experience. How do you balance basically those optimization, basically recommendation for conversion and maintaining the brand integrity and user experience on another hand? Because maybe not any change that you may suggest will be accepted internally, right?
hmm Yeah, I think it's kind of yes, there are certainly some like client management kind of things around their needs for brand consistency and things like that. I think the way that we navigate it is that when it really comes down to it, as long as we're on the same page about what the business goals are and we've proved what the problems are, as long as we have clear evidence for what the problems are that we're trying to solve, the solution itself might look different. So it might be that there's a couple versions of this that would solve the underlying problem. Maybe one works for the brand and one doesn't. So we might focus on that. That doesn't mean that we're not missing out, because there may be a gap between the brand on-brand experience versus the off-brand experience.
Uh-huh.
But there are things that are harder to quantify in the long term. that the brand team is bringing value around. So one thing I always kind of joke about is people say, what conversion rate should I aim for? And I said, if you want 100% conversion rate, you change your important metric to being button clicks, and then you have a big button on your website that says exit. And that's the only thing on your site.
So less is more. This is kind of what you.
No, I'm saying like if you don't, if you like in that case,
Yeah.
if you want someone to do something and that thing doesn't relate at all to your goals,
Okay.
you just want them to have everyone's clicking on the button,
Yeah.
make it so they leave.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Make a useless website and have them leave.
Yeah, I see.
Right?
I understand.
And so at the end of the day, it's a team effort to both understand what is the impact today on changing different behaviors on the site, and then collaborating with brand teams, which are trying to build long-term relationships or perspectives on the business.
Yes, absolutely. AJ, I'd like to talk a bit about now your experience and what you've done previously at Google. So you said you worked on their it was a CRO tool, right, that they launched, and I think it was deprecated later on, or it's no
It was
longer.
deprecated like a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Okay. So first maybe if you talk a bit about what you've done there, and then maybe you can tell us why actually Google decided to abandon that project.
Yeah, I can't speak too much about specifics about Google itself, but I can kind of speak in generalities.
Yeah, in general, for sure, yeah.
My experience at Google was wonderful. It's a team of some really, really smart people. And what I got out of the experience of working on this product in CRO is that I didn't know what CRO was. I was a UX researcher, and I could work in a lot of contexts. So I've had experience going to military bases and doing research in those contexts. I've had experiences in education. I've had experiences in healthcare. And so it was just kind of another place to apply my skills and learn how people use software and technology. And I ended up on this team in an innovation week. They call them Google Sprint Weeks. And we were whiteboarding solutions to how do we help marketers figure out the best user experience for their website. We weren't the first ones. Google had other CRO products before that, and this was the latest iteration.
It did have other products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one immediately prior to Google Optimize was called Google Experiment or Google Experiments.
Okay.
And this was replacing it. So it was more of a drag and drop. Any marketer could make changes and the tool would give data back on how to do it. But what was really cool for me was I then interviewed hundreds of people in all kinds of industries doing CRO. And usually as a researcher, you're kind of you're just like a blank slate. You're just there taking in information, asking good questions, like very neutral. You're not emotionally involved in what's happening. And I found myself walking away from conversations feeling jealous. Like, wow, these people have really cool jobs. They get to do what I do, which is figure out what makes people tick, how to design things, how to tackle problems people have with technology. And then they test it in the real world. And they get to see, did what I learned along the way make it in the real world? Or did it fail and stumble? And now, because it failed, we have to come back and keep working on it. And so that's what kind of drew me into this whole thing. I use Google Optimize. My clients use Google Optimize. So it's a big loss to the CRO market in general. We use a lot of other tools as well. But as a user, I think there were things to improve on. And I wish I wish it were still around to keep iterating on. But Google kind of has different things that comes and goes on with different products and focus. So, we're just working with other tools at this point.
I see. So this tool, the Google Optimize, was it a paid for tool or it was a free tool?
It was both. So we use it for free for most clients. I think the last kind of structure of payment that they had was you could have up to 5 tests live at a time for free. And then beyond that, you were paying a subscription to the broader suite of tools with Google Analytics. So there was definitely kind of like a big cliff to climb if you wanted to go from 5 to 6 tests a month.
Oh, I see. Okay. I mean, I used to work at Google as well in the past. So in a different team, a different geography as well. I worked in the UK for, at that time, I was called the DSO, and we used to sell Google search ads like those. It was called AdWords then. And I remember as well, they often launch products. We work on, various teams work on them for like years, and then suddenly they abandon them. Like Google Wave. I don't know if you've heard about Google Wave.
Yep.
Google Wave was the famous collaboration tool. And it was like making all the the bus then, and then it was abandoned. It was a good tool, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was way before like Slack and all these different project management and collaboration tools. But
I think
anyway, yeah, that's quite
something that's
interesting.
always struck me about Google is like there were so many good people there with so many good ideas, and like we weren't able to work on them, but that didn't always align with like the business goals. So I think that's kind of
Yeah.
it sounds like your experience too was kind of walking away with some
Yeah,
some things need to be more in focus than others, but man, a lot of people were working really hard on some good stuff.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Let's talk a bit about Experiment Zone. What do you guys do there? What are your services? Yeah.
Yeah, our primary service is conversion strategy and testing. So we're we're the conversion team for our clients. We work with them regularly to execute tests across their user experience. We do also offer coaching. So there are some teams that have their own developer, designer, analyst, all the folks to do CRO, but they're missing direction or they need a partner to kind of guide them through that strategy. And so that's the second service we offer is a CRO coaching, where we provide insights and guidance on how to execute the program, and then their team actually executes the test. So we're just like hand in hand with our client. We meet with them regularly to kind of go through the strategy, go through all the stages of a test. I'm a very project management oriented kind of person, and that kind of shows in how the team has been built. So we have clear stages or phases of each project, and we take our clients through each test through each of those phases. And so our goal is to be always testing and learning and iterating as we go. Um, I'd say the other thing that I like to talk about with Experiment Zone is some agencies will set a plan and just execute the plan. So they'll say, here's what we're going to do for the next year, or here's what we're going to do this quarter. It's really important to us that if we get strong signal of a new problem or a solution that has a big impact, that we are able to focus in on that and get more from that if it's applicable in other places. So if we learn something that works, like a certain message on the homepage, we will be flexible and iterate on what tests we're working on to make sure we're able to bring that to all the right spots so it can have a big impact everywhere.
I understand. Do you work with certain verticals more than others, or you work with any kind of
It's like
business?
the marketing, every marketer is supposed to know that you should have a very specific niche. And we started with a specific niche, but now we're everywhere. Like we work with all kinds of clients. We're in travel, we're in healthcare. We've done, traditional e-commerce, apparel and clothing. We've done kids stuff. So we've done construction. So honestly, it's kind of like what drew me into research to begin with is it's a skill set you can apply. So you're like a very deep expert in a skill set, and then you can apply it to lots of verticals. So that's where we are now. We actually just are happy to work with people who are curious and wanting to grow their business.
Okay, regardless of the industry they belong to.
Hmm.
Do you, when you take on a project, are you on a retainer, or you are paid based on performance? Like, can you talk a bit about that aspect as well?
Yeah, we're more on the retainer side of
On
the
the retainer
model.
side.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So
And go ahead.
yeah, you cannot guarantee like a certain target conversion rate or things like that.
No, but I always tell people that we would fire them as a client if we're not getting them at least 10x ROI on the work we're doing. And
Wow.
I have
Okay.
yet to fire anyone. So it's not a promise, it's not a commitment, but it is something that it's a standard I hold myself to and I hold our team to, that
Okay.
if we are having trouble figuring out how to grow revenue, we are going to dig in deep. So we will
Yeah.
throw in more qualitative research. We'll really figure out why the solutions we thought would work are not working. And then we'll find more kind of gems that will lead to more revenue.
I understand. And how is your team structured? Do you all work from the Austin office, or like in one area, or you work remotely? How are you basically serving your clients? And you serve clients everywhere, or like in a specific geography?
Yeah, we are 100% remote team. We were remote before it was cool. So we've been around for almost 9 years now. And I used to like try to position my camera on these things so wasn't clear that I was at my home office, but now I'm very comfortable with it since that's the world we're in. My whole team is remote, primarily in the United States, and our clients are mostly in the United States as well.
I see. Cool. Where can people find you? I mean, experimentzone.com, that's the website, I guess.
Experimentzone.com. We have our own podcast, so look us up. I think I would recommend checking our videos out on YouTube, so the Experiment Zone podcast. And then I'd love to extend the offer, and I hope some listeners will take me up on it, which is I did 100 coffees that set me off into this career path that I absolutely love. And the only reason I was able to find it was because people were willing to talk to me. So I offer the same. I do virtual coffees with people. I'm always happy to do a virtual coffee, whether or not there's a purpose to the meeting or just to get to know someone. So I would encourage people to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a note and just say, hey, could we do a virtual coffee and learn from each other?
Well, great. I guess the listeners have heard you, AJ, and the invitation is open for a coffee with you to learn more about CRO. Great. It was a very exciting discussion about CRO with you, AJ. Do you have any final words?
Be curious. I think every time I follow my curiosity, I learn more, my business grows, my team grows and is happier and healthier. So whether that's for your own business or your own well-being, be curious
And always A/B test, right?
and always A/B test.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again. We've learned a lot today about the world of conversion rate optimization and A/B testing. I'm sure there'll be more questions, so maybe we can organize a follow-up session in the near
Sounds
future
great.
to talk about more bits and pieces within the space. But yeah, great. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks to the listeners for sticking through the episode. And I hope you took home some good notes.
Absolutely. Thank you, AJ.
Take care.